everyone for joining us today in this awesome and beautiful morning, September 20th, 2024, in the CISS, Social Security Inter-American Conference. We're really proud to introduce this book that we developed along with the Mexican Social Security Institute. We have a lot of people joining us today. We have experts, people recognized in the topics that they have. And we're also approaching this book on paid housework. So I'm here to be the moderator. We're really pleased to have a great panel with colleagues, friends of the CISS and the IMSS. So I do not want to take up a lot of your time. So let's get right away into passing the floor to our Secretary General. Please, everyone, be welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much, Vanessa. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today online. First and foremost, I just want to congratulate you and thank you all for coming us on behalf of Mr. Zoe Robledo, President of the CISS, General Director of the Social Security Institute as well. And I would also like to greet those who are joining us today. I am really pleased to share the presidium with you. First and foremost, Mrs. Norma Gabriela Lopez Castañeda. She is the leader of the Social Security Institute of Mexico. Thank you so much, Mrs. Gabriela. Marcela Bautista, founder, director of the leadership program of AEC as well. Thank you so much. Welcome, as usual. Inés as well. González Nicolás, coordinator of and design secretary of work, also in the government of Mexico City for the next management. Welcome, Inés. Thank you so much for joining us. Also, we have Tania Espinosa Sanchez, manager of Global Economic and Organizing Week. So thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. And also, I wanted to greet our dear friend, Mr. Jotardo de Oliveira. He's member for the ILO and Cuba and Pasan in Syria. He's expert in gender discrimination. We have close friends, dear friends of this conference. I also would like to thank Mr. Julio Cesar Cervantes, President of the National Commission of the Commission for Savings Fund, Mr. Carlos Sanchez Arma, head of the Audit and Collection Unit of IMSS, Mr. Eduardo Alcaraz, head of the Social Security Incorporation Unit. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully, I'm not missing everyone. My apologies if that's the case. So we would also like to greet the students from the Union Leadership School 2024, staff from the Social Security staff, other institutions that are joining us today in this room as well. And like we mentioned as well, those who are following this online broadcast and streaming in general. Just overall, we know that as part of the CISS working agenda, it's been our interest to provide support to the different social security institutes, specifically for paid domestic workers all over the American continent. So all of this becomes very evident based on what we have been doing with the sector, such as Casa Nacional, also represented by our friend Marcelina Bautista, Latin American Confederation, CONETRAVE, International Federation of Workers, and the multiple institutions, organizations with whom we have also created collaboration liens and bonds for us to be able to continue moving forward in this regard. So we know that this is not new, no, it's not a new topic for the Social Security system. We like to also think about the fact that ever since we founded the conference in 1942 in Chile, Santiago de Chile, we passed resolution number 9, where we called American institutions to promote access to Social Security, specifically for those who are domestic paid workers. And this was published in Resolution 63, 1964, and 1967, and 1968 resolutions. So, based on these resolutions by the General Meeting of this international body, throughout century, 20th century, we really did not move forward a lot in this progress. We even provided more support in the 20th century, and this is all part of Convention 189 in 2011 on domestic workers, Convention 189 of the ILO. We have different legislative changes that we need to pinpoint across the whole continent. In Mexico, as we have already discussed in the work that we are presenting today, this is a process that started relatively late because of a ruling by the Supreme Court of Justice in 2009, where we tore down some legal barriers so that this could become a path to incorporate Social Security, to incorporate our different domestic workers to the Social Security system. So for us to be able to design a pilot program that was used to determine the characteristics of the legal reform by the end of 2022. Now, this group of persons were also incorporated to our regime. So I know that I'm not going to really delve into this topic. That's the main reason why we have a lot of the authors. We have different perspectives as well. And despite this has been a relatively short period of time where this program that has run, it has become a benchmark for the whole Latin American region because it combines two characteristics very successfully. Well, the fact that we are having equal conditions when it comes to adapting to some specific aspects is something that seems very easy, but in practice, it entails a lot of complexities. In some countries, it also focused on certain activities. And even though in principle it is a purpose that we're all looking for, at times these specificities were not considered. So this also entailed certain barriers, or maybe these processes may be too complexes for domestic workers to be part of the system, or maybe the characteristics are not the same. So this is somehow leading to exclusions in Social Security. We have also privileged some special regimes as well. This also contributes to foster its scope, and then the strategies are not assigning this type of scales. In contrast, the IMSS has managed to really have both principles successfully. On the one hand, we're incorporating Social Security workers to our ordinary regime, and many times those who are also responsible for this work, they can also just really work in many locations. They may have varied income, amongst many other aspects that we need to consider. In addition to that, we designed a very simple mechanism, affiliation mechanism. For that reason, we considered that the American case experience could also help us communicate incorporation strategies to other American countries. We hope that this joint work is useful for the interest public. Um, we know that IMSS, Social Security Institute of Mexico, has just become immortalized in this book. There's nothing left for me but to thank you for taking part in this event. Thank you so much, the technical staff as well. Thank you so much for doing this type of extensive information. So for planning, and all of this would have not been possible without the contributions of the authors of each and every one of all 11 chapters. So I would really like to thank you. I would like to recognize you for what you have been doing. So, of course, We would just like to thank all of the staff for having just being with us when it comes to organizing this event. So again, this is the collaboration of an international body, specifically for Social Security, organized civil society as well, the academia, for the admission of Social Security as a universal right for all persons across the whole continent. So thank you so much. And well, let's pass the floor to our authors. Thank you so much, Secretary. Now, Norma Gabriela Lopez Castañeda is going to share a message on Social Security. She holds an NLB in the Instituto Autónomo de Mexico and a master's degree on tax law by the Panamericana University, with certification on international taxes by the University of New York. Before she was incorporated into the institute, she also held several positions in the federal public administration, and specifically in the tax department. She has been the legal corporate department of the asset management service. She has been the director of laws on products and duties. She has also been part of the Ministry of Public Credit and Finance, where she worked for 11 years. In January 2014, she served as the head of Social Security Incorporation Department and the Collection and Incorporation Department. She has been working in affiliation rights. Since 2017, she was appointed the management director of the institute, and after December 2018, she served as the head of the incorporation and collection department of the institute. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm really pleased to greet you all and just being here next to my dear friend, Secretary of the Social Security Commission, Alvaro Velarca. There is no question that it is such a privilege, Marcelina, just being with you as director, founder of the leadership team of all of the different household employees, dear Secretary of School as well. Thank you so much, Mrs. Inés González. We have a lot to work on. It's such an honor, such a pleasure to just greet you, Mr. Pedro Americo, for the office of Mexico and Cuba, of the ILO, Dan Espinosa Sanchez, coordinator for Latin America as well. So given the fact that in this event, they're going to be doing the formal presentation of the book, then I'm going to have certain insights just to talk about the fact that this is volume number 6 of an editorial collection that was designed to commemorate the 80th anniversary. And what's a better way than just really recognizing a question that we have with social security workers? So this is the main reason why we're devoting ourselves to just paid work as a journey towards getting into social security. I know that I do not have to explain the reason why it has been quite a journey, right? All of us involved in this, we are very clear about this. We also know that we managed to have a very inclusive scheme and something that has really helped us do all of this. Today we have 61,000 active persons in Social Security workers, and throughout this scheme as well, we have 30,000 persons who managed to get their pension as Social Security workers. Maybe they work at a different point in time, maybe in a house, in a factory, in a company. So with this scheme, they managed to recover these periods where they could contribute. And now, today, they have all of this the pension, access to pension. So the formal social security aspects are really important. This is what we just discussed and saw in social security. We're now managing to really somehow help these men and women get their rights restated. They had some periods already quoted and contributed with, so they're going to have access to pension plus medical care. On the other hand, I would also like to greet very warmly to all of the authors who were here today with us. So this book, this volume is thanks to all of the collaboration. So the very valuable contributions that allowed the IMSS, this conference, to really integrate or put this work together. So Yvonne Cisneros, my dear friend, she was a deputy president of the Social Security Commission in the past legislator at the chamber, at the low chamber. So we got a great recognition on how she positioned in Social Security. So it is a topic that perhaps was not really known in detail. So it is such a great work that we have been doing with Social Security today in the public agenda. Our dear colleague and friend, so Mr. Preciado. So there is no question that to this date we have this insurance scheme, and this allowed us to just really move with the first steps forward. These were very complicated. There was no legal framework, but that also led us to just um, really being able to do all of this. So Marce, thank you so much. Thank you so much for really paving the way for us to be able to do all of this. There is no question that today we have been able to really highlight all of these efforts. So the very first thing that comes to my mind is that we know that in this typical pathway that leads us to be here is that very specific dynamic that leads us to just really bring all of the branches of government together as part of the Supreme Court. And we know that the Institute is working through the Congress for us to be able to make sure that Social Security is a right that is protected and short for people. It is quite specific. It comes after a ruling by the court. It was just a proposal to be able to just really have this very specific scheme for Social Security purposes. And that's how we got this pilot test of Social Security workers. And this was approved by the technical concept as well. So there is no question that we had a very warm welcome by the legislative branch. We also had very important aspects, so like just like the federal work law. And one of the main steps forward is that we have really enabled the Social Security to pave the way by generating the required information to see, okay, who are we going to just really govern, regulate? Who is this collective? We were talking in the 70s about people who were incorporating into a family, or if today this work path was different. There's something that I recognize. I always tell my dear Marcelina and all of us who are representatives of this union, all of these social security private sector as well, we're not just really visualizing female domestic workers. No, we're thinking of a universe of men, even though, because in the past we only had 95%. We said that they were just women, and now according to our statistics institute is 91%, meaning 4% did not know that they were part of this category. They were not just, let's say, included into this, they were also part of this collective. So another thing that I believe to be very important for me to be able to highlight is that all of this time that we have received as part of this pilot plan, all of this has been just part of the social civil society as well, collectives, international bodies, ILO, for instance, they were by our side in different studies, of course, CISS, they have been our partners when it comes to really attracting and bringing international experiences. I think that it's always nice taking a look at what other countries are doing, and I feel really proud about how things have been doing. So really the way to do this is going to help us put Mexico in the very first top position so that they can become an international, let's say, benchmark. We're the only country that provides social security without conditioning, let's say, the number of days of a person, just with the mere fact of just really paying the minimum amount of contributions, then you're going to be able to be part of this. So 99% of the persons who have been incorporated are going to have this coverage for a full month. So this has been recognized by international bodies as well. And we're not saying this just to be or to feel pleased or anything like that. On the contrary, Mexico has allowed himself to be a benchmark all over the world. Just think about how many countries who have 2.4 million Mexicans who are domestic workers included. That led us to the CISS, allowing the new insurance scheme. Of course, this is still a pilot test, and the certificate that is specially designated the Mexican model, that is an international benchmark when it comes to social security, like we mentioned. I believe that we have many, many more things that where we could just keep on moving forward. Part of the communication, also to think about the speech. You were talking about an obligation. Let's think about the fact that this pilot program at first did not have these characteristics. Now it has become and it is constituted as an obligation. Like I said at first, now we are amongst friends. We're starting to have the very first reports. We're going to have actions for us to be able to just really start doing all of this. And like we mentioned, we have different fora, and we always have someone who is willing to just really be part of this recognition and being part to respect social security of workers, social security workers. We have a series of, let's say, tax stimuli, and we also have sectors, universes that can help us just really work with these rights schemes. And well, there is no question that this is going to help us consolidate human rights that are included as part of Social Security in a process that is absolutely endogenous with a scaffolding that is helping us with roots. And having said that, I would like to confirm on behalf of the General Director, on my own behalf, by Mr. Zoe Robledo and myself, we just really ratify our commitment with the Social Security Institute of Mexico to foster all of our efforts to promote, protect, develop these human rights to Social Security for domestic workers. This is going to allow us to keep on working, let's say, towards more inclusion, protection of people, and in this way, for us to be able to foster justice conditions and well being conditions in our country. Thank you. Thank you so much for your kind words. Now, we're going to have a brief message by Marcelina Bautista. I think that everyone is familiar with this. She is the director and founder of the National Center for Professional Training and Leadership of CASE, and she founded it 23 years ago. She has 23 years of experience as a domestic worker. She has also been the founder of organizations and instruments of law, social workers like TRAN, that was created in 1988, the International Social Workers and Domestic Workers Federation, AFIT, in 2013, the first union in the international sector of domestic workers, the very first union in this industry in Mexico, and in the process of Convention 199 of the ILO in 2011. She took part in the Convention 190 and the workplace to later ratified in 2013. She founded the first corporation also for social workers, CODEP, in Mexico. She has been recognized, among many other things, with an international award of the Friedrich Ebert. She was one of the top leaders. Marcelina Bautista also has a diploma course in communication by the civil society, and 2013 in the government school, social transformation, and she has a diploma on social security, justice, attention. My pleasure, attention by the American University in the city of Mexico. Thank you so much, Marcelina, and my apologies for the bloopers. Thank you. Please go ahead. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone. First and foremost, I would just like to thank the CISS for always having us here in all activities, specifically for us to be able to really present this paid social work, a trip towards social security in general. I would like to greet our director of the ILO as an institution, international institution that has always been helping us in just really working side by side with international and national associations. I would also like to greet as well.
Y felicito, por supuesto, los 80 aniversarios del IMSS, que justo, como dice el libro, gran
So, like the
travesía que
book
hemos
said,
pasado para
this is a
incorporar a
great
las trabajadoras
travel that we have been doing
a
as
seguridad
well.
social de manera obligatoria.
We have been
Quiero
doing all of
compartir con
this,
ustedes, por
and
supuesto,
we wanted to share with you.
que para este libro narramos sobre nuestra línea de tiempo. Tanto Rodrigo como yo recuperamos esa línea de tiempo
So,
de más
me
de
and
20
myself
años
and all of us, we have been doing all of this
rescatar
for us to be
toda
able
esta
to
lucha que hemos
somehow go
llevado
back
a través
to
de estos
this
años y
everything that we have been doing over
claro
the past
que
years. And there's no
también cómo
question
nos
that
replanteamos
we also
las
want to think about how
organizaciones
we have
pues
been working as
cambios, ese cambio
organizations
estructural
and
que hemos tenido durante estos años. Y no solamente eso, sino
it's
también
not just that, but
hoy pensamos que debemos trabajar sobre todo un cambio en la cultura del trabajo en el hogar
the
hacia un
culture
nuevo
of, let's
paradigma
say, work at home.
laboral que permita a las personas empleadoras reconocer su casa como un centro de trabajo y sobre todo
We know that
reconocer
as a
los
work
derechos
center, we
humanos
also need to
laborales
recognize
de las personas
working human
trabajadoras del
rights
hogar.
as well.
Gracias también a
For
nuestra
social
lucha
security
y a nuestros
workers.
aliados logramos los siguientes cambios
So
que
we
quiero
also have the
mencionar
same changes that I
porque
wanted to mention as
pues
well.
muchas veces
And
hablamos
many
sobre
times we're
este
talking about
sector y no estamos
this
viendo
sector and we're
también
not
todos estos
seeing
avances
all
que
of this
nosotras dimos
progress
y
steps that
cuando digo
we have taken
no
as
quería
well.
mencionar pues todas
And
las personas, instancias,
I do
porque
not want to
me voy a
mention all of the
brincar, no los voy a
persons,
mencionar y
different
pues
bodies,
durante estos
CISS.
años
It's
han
just that
sido
over these
infinidades de
past years we
mujeres,
have had
hombres,
many
instancias, instituciones
we have
internacionales que han
institutions,
arropado nuestra
international
lucha y
institutions.
nos tienen hoy aquí como presentes
And
y
today
haciendo
I
visible,
know
pues
that they
este
are
trabajo
just helping
invisible que
us make
nosotros
everything more
empezamos
visible.
hace 24
And
años.
we know that we
Hace
started with
24
this
años las
work
trabajadoras del hogar
24
ni
years
siquiera
ago, social
conocíamos nuestros
workers at the
derechos.
time. Well, we know
Hace
that as social
24
workers, we
años
were
las
not
personas
aware
empleadoras nos
of all of our
decían, pues
rights.
ustedes son
And we
sirvientas,
know
no
that
tienen derechos. Hace
sometimes
24 años la Ley
employers would
Federal
tell
del
us, you
Trabajo
are just
nos
servants,
tenía
you do not have
invisibles, por
rights.
supuesto,
We were
¿no? Entonces creo
invisible.
que hablar
So, of
hoy de
course, I know
todos
that
esos
talking today
cambios ha
about the
sido
fact
no
that we have so many
solamente
changes,
por nosotras
this is
como
not just because
organizaciones, sino por
of
todas las
how we are
organizaciones
as
que
organizations, all
sintieron ese
organizations
compromiso
that felt
con este
committed
sector. Así que
with just really taking part of
el 12
everything that
de
we're doing in this
julio
sector. So, for
del
that reason, in
19,
July the 2nd,
las personas
2019,
trabajadoras del hogar entran
all just
en la Ley Federal del Trabajo,
domestic workers
en donde hoy cuentan con los
were
mismos derechos
incorporated
que
to the
cualquier persona
federal
trabajadora.
labor law, and they have the
También
same rights
se
just like any
ratifica el
other
convenio
workers. We
189
also
que nos
ratified
duró
Convention
9
189.
años de lucha todos los días y que por
It took us
fin
9 years to
se
get to
logra
that
su
point, and
ratificación
finally
y
we
hoy lo
managed to
tenemos
ratify it.
como
So
una ley
today we
del
have
cual
it
hay que
as
hacerlo
a law.
valer.
We
También
need to
la
also
CONASAMI
enforce our rights.
define
CONASAMI
un
as
salario
well
mínimo
defined a
profesional
minimum
para las personas
professional wage
trabajadoras del hogar, lo cual es muy
for
importante considerarlo
social
porque
workers
muchas
and
veces no
domestic
se
workers, because
considera
we know
este
that many
salario a la
times
hora de calcular
this
las
is a salary
prestaciones de
that
las
is not
trabajadoras del hogar
estimated or
porque
considered
pues
whenever
mucha
we
gente
are
no lo conoce y
estimating
se
what are the
basa en el
benefits
salario
for Social
mínimo
Security
general
workers.
y
So
no es así, por
it is mainly
supuesto.
just based on
También
a,
hemos
let's say,
luchado para la
minimum
ratificación
wage,
del
and
convenio
that's not how it should be done.
190
We are
sobre
also
violencia en el lugar de
striving to
trabajo, que
get
es
the
muy importante
ratification
para
of
el sector
Convention
de las
190 on
trabajadoras del hogar y
violence
por
in the
supuesto
workplace. This is very important for
tanto la CISS
domestic
como la
workers. So
Colatrao
both
estuvimos presentes en
AFIP,
la
Colatrat, they were
creación de
all present in the
este
creation
convenio
of this agreement, this resolution, this convention, because we know that working in home is also very important. And lastly, we have the incorporation after a day of work, the Social Security for the different domestic workers, and always the fact that they have been along with us with all of the initiatives that we have had. Now that we're seeing progress of our incorporation for all social workers, of course, we know that we're talking about 2.5 million domestic workers, out of which we know that this is a small number. And I'm also positive that we will keep on working so that we can keep on progressing. Secretary of for Mexico City, I am positive that we're going to just do amazing work like the previous secretaries have done it. All of them who have also worked on this for Mexico City. I'm really pleased that you're here, that you have reached to this point because we have all strived for this work, for this effort as part of the unionized women group. So we're talking about 2.5 million domestic workers nationwide, out of which 229,041 are from Mexico City. That means that we still have a lot to do. Just 4% have access to some of our rights. This also speaks volumes about how Social Security is moving forward. We have other rights as well. So 97% are informal workers. So we're still just really striving because we know that there's no will from employers to incorporate their workers. We have used a lot of tools that would enable and allow workers to just really do all of this. We have worked and we have recognized that this has been a topic that has not been really approached or addressed in many areas. There's no way of addressing this, approaching this, and that's the main reason why we have created this so that domestic workers can recognize violence at work. We have created a violence meter. We have also created a salary or a wage manual. It's not just a schedule or, let's say, a table in general. We have specified each and every one of the work activities. It seems that there are more than 10 activities. We have created a written labor agreement in writing. It has been very, very useful for us to keep on working with these domestic workers. And we have really created an application for domestic workers to use it. It was a need for employers, and today we're also working so that we can have other tools. And also, when we realized that our rights had not been respected or that the amendments to laws in our countries were not being enforced, we worked with the ILO as well in 2010 as well for us to be able to be part of convention as well. Latin America and the regions that have the most ratifications as well. So as a tool as well, Sinatrao, for instance, in 2015, and more recently, we have created the very first cooperative of women, sustainable women as well. They should also work so for us to be able to just really move forward, to create also more awareness, to raise more awareness with social workers by promoting rights as well. to have dignified work, to also to keep on notarizing, and like we have already discussed this,
personas
to
trabajadoras del hogar a través de un
professionalize
programa de
social
capacitación
workers through
de
a
habilidades
training
para el trabajo
program with
y
skills as
participar en
well,
el diálogo para el
and to take
establecimiento
part in a
de
discussion as
propuestas
well,
del Sistema Nacional
and
de
to make a
Cuidados.
proposal
Y
on the
para
national
cerrar,
care
invito
system. And to
tanto a
wrap it up,
trabajadoras del
I just
hogar
want to
como a
invite
las
social
personas
security
empleadoras a
workers,
ir cambiando
employers to
la
just
actitud
keep on
para ir
changing their attitude,
haciendo una valoración
and to
específica del
also do a
trabajo
very
en el hogar
specific
y los derechos
assessment
de
at
las
work,
trabajadoras
the
en Estados
rights of
Unidos,
women
como lo
as well,
establece la Ley Federal del Trabajo.
according to what
Muchas
we have
gracias.
in the federal labor law.
Muchísimas gracias, querida Marcelina,
Thank you so
por tus
much, dear
palabras de
Marcelina.
mensaje. A
Thank you so much for
continuación
your kind
tendremos un
words.
mensaje de
And
Inés
now we
González
have a couple
Nicolás.
of words
Ella
by
es
Inés
sindicalista,
González
feminista,
Nicolás.
socióloga del
She is a
trabajo por la
union
Universidad
member,
Autónoma Metropolitana
feminist,
y maestra en
sociologist
Derecho por la
by
Universidad
the
Autónoma de Barcelona.
Metropolitan
Abogada
Autonomous
y
University.
colaboradora
She holds a
colegiada de
master's
la Red
degree
Mujeres
in gender
Sindicalistas.
and law by
Fue
the
directora de
Autonomous
Diálogo
University of
Social y
Barcelona,
de
founder and
Foro de
manager
la Fundación
of the
Friedrich Ebert Fundación Friedrich
Women's Union
durante
Network.
20 años.
She has also
La
been
jefa
part
de
of the
gobierno
union for a
electa
long
Clara
time, for over
Brugada
20
ha
years.
designado a
And
Inés González,
Clara
próxima delegada de la
Brugada,
Secretaría del
the
Trabajo y
mayor of
Política del
Mexico
Empleo
City,
del Gobierno
appointed
de la Ciudad de
Mrs.
México y
Inés
estamos muy
to
honrados de que
work
esté
on
aquí esta
Mexico
mañana.
City. We're
Muchas
really glad
gracias.
to have you. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Gracias, Vanessa.
Thank you so much,
Gracias,
Vanessa.
Álvaro. Gracias,
Thank you so much, Alvaro.
Marcelina. Nuestra
Marcelina, thank you,
secretaria de IMSS,
everyone.
Norma. Mucho
Norma
gusto
as well.
conocerte.
My
A la
pleasure
compañera de
to meet
Diego,
you
que
as
hemos
well.
trabajado por mucho tiempo.
Diego's
Bueno, quiero
colleague, we have
aclarar
been working for a long time.
muchas gracias, Angélica.
I just want to
Y por
clarify,
supuesto,
Angelica, I just want to thank
nuestro
you
director
and
para
our
México y Cuba,
director for Mexico
Pedro
and Cuba,
Antonio, que tuvimos una
Pedro
reunión
Antonio.
ayer, antier. Así
We
que
had a
mucho
meeting
gusto en
yesterday and the day
acompañarte
before
en
yesterday.
esta
I'm really
misión.
pleased
Sé que
to
aquí están
work with you. I
muchas
know
personas
that we have a lot of people
que
here
están
today
pues muy interesadas y
who are really
tantas
interested
personas que a lo
in,
largo de muchos años
also a
han
lot of
podido
persons who
participar
over
en
the
esta
past years have been
travesía
able to
de la
work
lucha de las
in
trabajadoras
this,
del hogar.
let's say,
Por supuesto, menciono a mi
journey of
esposo,
social
Daniel,
security workers. So
y desde la Fundación
again,
Friedrich Ebert
ever since
trabajamos
we had
pues
this
al menos una
Frederick
década
Everett,
con
at
las
least we worked
políticas
for a
más
decade,
duras.
Marcelino.
Aquí está la compañera Marilú, que del Sinatrao.
Marilu as
Espero que
well
no
from
me haya olvidado.
Sinatrave.
Sofía está por allá,
Sophie's
compañera
somewhere
trabajadora del
over
hogar.
there.
Muchas caras
She's also a
conocidas y por
colleague,
supuesto darle un saludo
domestic
a
worker.
todas
So I also
las
want to thank
sindicalistas y
all of our
compañeros, todos
union
los
members,
sindicalistas que
young
son
union
parte de
members,
la
for
escuela
just being part
sindical de la
of
Fundación
our
Friedrich
union,
Ebert, como ya lo mencionó
this
y lo
Frederick Everett as
presentó
well.
Álvaro al
And this
principio.
is how
Pues me da
Alvaro
mucho
mentioned
gusto
this at
estar aquí.
first.
Muchas
I'm
gracias
really
por la
pleased to be
invitación.
discussing this.
Quiero
Really, honestly, I
reconocer el
appreciate the
esfuerzo
invitation. I would
que
like to recognize
principalmente
the
las
effort
trabajadoras del hogar han dado a lo
that
largo
social
de
security
muchas
workers
décadas.
have helped us with
Creo
as
que
well.
los últimos tiempos es la lucha
So
más, la
we
lucha
know that we
social
have been
más
really
importante que
working.
hemos vivido. Y que también creo que es la lucha que más ha
This is the
acercado
type
a las
of
personas
uh,
para acompañarlos.
strives
Y
and
hoy, como
fights
ya
and
lo ha narrado
everything that we have
Diego,
been doing. So as Marcelino has mentioned,
tienen sus derechos consagrados en la ley.
we have our
Pero
rights
estos
consacred
derechos,
in the law, but
como todos
these
sabemos,
rights,
es una
like we all
promesa
know,
si no
are
se
a
vuelven
promise,
realidad. Pero
and they
estamos
remain as a
avanzando
promise if they do
y
not become a
hay un
reality.
largo
We're still
trecho que
moving
tenemos
forward.
que recorrer
We're a
todavía.
long, long time, and we still
Y
have
ya
to go
Marcelina
a long
mucho
way.
nos
So,
va a dar una
Marcelino,
relatoría
thank you so
interesante
much for
de
having
cómo
this
ha sido el
amazing
proceso
rapporteurship
para que las
on how
mujeres
the process
trabajadoras
has
del
been
hogar, porque
like
son
for
trabajadoras del
social
hogar
security
y
workers as
son
well.
nombradas como
They're
de
not
la
just
forma como lo ha dicho Marcelina,
appointed, as
con
Marcelino
muchas
has
palabras,
mentioned as well.
Marce,
Marcelino
porque
really appreciate what
pues
you're
ella no
mentioning.
puede tener esta
And
visión tan completa de lo que ha
I don't
sido
know if someone could have
esta
such a
historia larga
great and a broad
conseguir los
approach like
derechos
the
de
one that you
un
have as well.
sector tan grande
This
y
is
tan
such a
importante
great
en términos económicos y
sector that we
sociales,
have as well.
laborales para nuestro país, sin duda.
This is specifically for our
Marcelina
country,
y las
so
trabajadoras del hogar.
Marcelino as well.
Y también yo quiero reconocer el
And I would also
esfuerzo de
like to
Marcelina,
recognize the
el
effort
esfuerzo
of
de otras
Marcelina, the
compañeras,
effort of
como por
other
ejemplo
dear colleague friends like Norma Palacios, Isidro Llanos as well, and many other names that we got at many, many times. I just really worked with them. And I remember that in August 2015, Sinatrao just turned 9 years. So our main job in this family is just to work as a union member. I am a feminist, and I have been working, of course, with our union. From our perspective, we have been working as union members, and we believe that it is very important for us to be able to just ensure the different rights all over the world. A society like ours cannot be conceived without unions. And I would say a union cannot be conceived even without women. So I think that the work of Cinetrao is key. And just like CASE, let's say by running CASE, that's how we really got into this movement with CASE. Who did not go through CASE? All of you as well, all of you who are here. We all know that CASE has been really significant, really important throughout everything that we're doing. I would also like to thank, I would like to recognize the efforts of the authorities, the 40 government. This would have not been possible without a government like the one that we have. Why is this narration made by Marcelina? And like they all mentioned, and like the title says, this is just paid work. We're taking a path towards social security. So I think that we would have continued with this journey, with this path, if we would have not had a government like the one that we have nowadays. And I think that that's really valuable. It is valuable saying both the ratification that we had with the convention, the pilot plan, social security plans as well. All of this was possible based on everything that we did. This is a government that is sensitive to all of the social issues that we have. It is the commitment that we have had. We have different select authorities. We have Marce as well. Well, we have to keep on working. We have been part of the civil society for a long time. So now we're going to do this from a different area, from a different location. Marilu, Sofia, I would just like to thank you just for helping us. And like Marcelina mentioned, it's not just a matter of just working because we know each other. No, we have many women. We have Marcela. Well, I had a different number, 181,000, but again, she's got the official numbers that are changing. So we have 200,000 persons, domestic workers. Most of them are women. So it is key to pay close attention. They're part of the sectors that we need to pay close attention to. So we need to just really make everything more formal. I think that our path in legal terms is really important. We need to make this a reality so that we have just equality for social security workers and just in general for all women in Mexico City. So I would just like to keep on just, of course, talking, but that's not possible. I rather just tell you all that we will keep on working.
En el otro lado y yo me comprometo a
So I really undertake this duty to keep on working over time. So please feel at ease that I will be keep on working as well. Alvaro, thank you so much as well for having me here.
Muchísimas gracias, Inés.
Thank you so much, Inés. And now it's time to get into the second part of our event as well. And now let's get into the comment part. Now, we're pleased to have both Pedro Américo Furtado de Oliveira, Mr. Arancilla as well.
tendremos el agrado de tener lo mismo
We will
para
be
de
very,
Tania
very
Espinosa que nos
pleased just to
acompaña
have
aquí
Mrs.
en la
Tania
sala.
Espinosa as well with us in the
Bueno,
room.
Pedro Américo Furtado de
So Pedro
Oliveira
Américo Furtado de
cuenta con una
Oliveira
sólida formación
has a
académica en
sound
Brasil, Holanda y
academic
Bélgica. Es formado en relaciones
education in
internacionales y
Brazil,
economía y fue
the,
profesor
the
de todas las
Netherlands,
universidades de su país.
Belgica
En el
as
sector
well,
privado se
and
desempeñó como
Belgium.
asesor
He has been a
internacional de la
professor of
Asociación
different
Brasileña de
universities in the private
Supermercados,
sector.
donde puso
He
en
has been
marcha políticas
providing
de
international
responsabilidad social
counseling on the
empresarial.
Brazilian Supermarket
En el sector
Association, where
público
he
fue
put in
responsable del
place
área
social
internacional del
security
gobierno del Distrito
policies in the
Federal y
public sector. He
consultor
was
del Ministerio
responsible
de
for the
Relaciones
international
Exteriores
government
de
area of
Brasil.
the federal district
Entre 2001
and
y
a
2008
consultant
coordinó el
for the
programa de
Ministry of
eliminación
Foreign
del trabajo
Affairs of
infantil
Brazil.
de la
2008,
Organización
2008, he
Internacional del
ran the
Trabajo
program
en Brasil.
to
Como
eliminate
especialista
child
senior en
labor
diálogo
as
social
part
y
of the
trabajo
ILO,
infantil
as
de la
a
Oficina
senior
Central de la
expert
OIT
in
en
social
Ginebra,
discussion and
cuestionó la
high
financiación y
labor
la
of
evaluación
the ILO in
técnico
Geneva.
de
He
cooperación
ran
en
the
América
financing and
Latina
implementation
de
of
aplicación
technical
hasta
cooperation
2015.
projects in Latin
Luego
America,
figuró como
Asia
director de
in
la Oficina País
2018
de la
as
OIT
a
para
role
México y Cuba,
as a part
de
of the
América
ILO
Latina
in
Africana y la
Cuba.
Oficina de
He
País en
also
la
had
OIT para
the
Argentina.
country
Y si
office
me permiten, antes de
in
darle paso a la voz,
Argentina.
voy
So
a
before
presentar
we
también
pass
a
the floor
Paz
to him,
García,
I'm
que
also
nos
going to
acompaña en el
introduce
comentario. Y también nos acompaña a la distancia. Bienvenida, Paz.
both
Paz
Paz Pansiva
Aranceles
as
es
well. She's going
especialista
to
senior
Paz is
regional
also a
de
senior
género y no
expert
discriminación para América Latina,
non-discrimination
el
for
Caribe
Latin
y la
America and the
OIT.
Caribbean of the
Paz ha sido
ILO.
asesora de la ministra del
She has
Trabajo,
been
Seguridad
as
Social
well
y
a
Migraciones de España de
advisor in Spain in
2018-2020 y cuenta
2018,
con más de 20 años
2020.
de experiencia en
She has over
asesoramiento en
20
políticas
years of
públicas
experience in
inclusivas
public
para
policies,
varias
inclusive public
agencias
policies for different
de las
agencies
de la OIT, la CNUD, de la
of
UNIR,
the
de la OMS,
ILO,
con
in
experiencia en América Latina y el
UNDP,
Caribe, Europa, el Magreb
OPS,
y África
Europe,
Occidental.
Maghreb,
Licenciada en Ciencias Políticas,
Western
Administración
Africa.
Pública y Sociología por la Universidad
She
Complutense de
holds
Madrid
a
y máster en
degree in
Gobernanza por el
public
Instituto de Estudios
management,
para el Desarrollo de la Universidad
sociology
de
by the
CISS.
Complutense University of
Cuenta
Madrid,
con un
and
certificado
she
titular en
has a
Liderazgo e Innovación
certificate as
Social por
well,
el SADE
social
Business School
innovation by the
y el
City Business
Design
School,
Thinking por la Sloan School of
and
Management
by the
de la
design
MIT.
business
Sus
school,
últimas
design thinking,
publicaciones
and the last
son Corrupción en el
publications
mundo del trabajo
are
sobre violencia
building,
y acoso,
let's say,
que
a
habla sobre el
work on
convenio social
violence
limitado
and
de la OIT,
harassment.
Agenda del Estado de Derecho, las personas trabajadoras de América
We
Latina con
also have
responsabilidad de cuidado,
workers in Latin
la mirada
America
regional al convenio número
with a regional
156 de
look to
2023 para
Resolution
sostenibilidad,
156,
agenda para un nuevo contrato
sustainability
ecosocial en
agenda for a
en
new
las Mercos.
eco-social
The Future of
agreement,
Employment and
future
Industrial
of employment
Relations.
and industrial
Bienvenida Paz,
relations.
bienvenido
Please pass,
Pedro.
be
Les
welcome,
cuento
Pedro.
que tienen
So,
20 minutos
you
para
have
su
20 minutes
comentario, porque
for
nos
your
gusta
comment
expresados,
part.
pero le cedo el uso de la voz.
So,
Muchísimas
I'll pass
gracias.
the floor to
Adelante.
all of you. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, Vanessa, por la
Thank you so
oportunidad.
much, Vanessa, for giving me the chance. Good morning,
Quisiera agradecer al
everyone.
Instituto Mexicano de
I would like
Seguridad
to
Social y
thank the
Seguro
Social
Social y
Security
obviamente la
um,
Conferencia Internacional Interamericana de Seguridad
Mexican,
Social. Y con
the Social Security
esto,
Institute of
obviamente, a
Mexico,
toda la
CISS
empresa
as well,
Velar
and well,
y claro,
my
agradecer aquí
dear
también
friend
a
Alvaro
la
Velarca as well.
compañía
So thank you
Instituto
so
Verde
much.
Norma,
It's such a
Instituto CISS,
pleasure,
que me ha
such an
propuesto
honor
estar
to have
aquí
you all.
con el instituto y aprovecho
I'm really happy to be
la
here with the
oportunidad de
Institute
también
as well.
saludo también
And
al
I would also
licenciado
like to
Josué
greet
Robledo.
Mr. Jose
Hemos
Robledo.
varias iniciativas
We have had a lot of initiatives
presente
with
en
them.
este momento. A Marcelina, un
So,
gusto ver
Marcelina, it's such a
aquí.
pleasure to have you here.
Con esto quería saludar a Marilu y a
And
todos
with this, I
quienes
wanted to
se han
just
fortalecido en
say,
Querétaro y el movimiento
greet to
que estamos
Marilu and greet
llevando a
everyone.
cabo.
Thank you so much for
Como
being here.
Inés, un gustazo
Ines, it's
verlo,
such a
verla.
pleasure
Veo
to
bastante
see you, to have
movimiento.
you here. I know
Hace
that
pasamos
it has been quite
hace
a
un par de
demanding
días
and
a
busy week.
Sonia,
However,
que nos
I would
acompaña,
just
obviamente a
want to
Paz,
thank
mi compañera
everyone, Mrs. Paz. I'm really
especialista
pleased to
de la
be
OIT
next
y a todas
to
las
such an
personas
expert of
de la
the
mesa
ILO,
y los organismos también
and
aliados
also
como
all of the
CONAVE,
bodies
como
that we have
la
just joining us
Fundación y
today,
demás.
and
No, de
people in the
verdad,
foundation and many
es
more.
un
So,
gusto poder
to be
estar
honest, it's
aquí
such a
presentando su
pleasure
trabajo
to
por
be
escrito.
here today.
No quiero tratar de adelantar mucho contenido porque Paz
I
lo
do
va a
not
hacer
want to
porque fue
really
un
cover a
trabajo
lot
que
of topics
pudimos
because it was a
colaborar
joint
para
um,
visibilizar los
collaboration. It
avances
was
en temas de
work that we
seguridad
all conducted
para
as
que los
well.
trabajadores del hogar puedan gozar de manera efectiva de seguridad social.
So, to
Como
do it
saben,
all,
la OIT
social security,
ha
as you know,
considerado siempre que la paz
ILO
universal
has always
y
considered that
permanente, por
universal
tanto, solo se puede
peace is
basarse en la
permanent
justicia
and
social.
only based
Y
on social
desde que
security
se
and
aprobó la
justice. So,
Constitución
ever since we started just incorporating the ILO, we just really, quote unquote, we quoted the principles, or we stole the principles of the Social Security Social Security of the Mexican Constitution as well. So all of the different ILO topics that needed to be urgently addressed to improve the labor conditions of all human beings and to improve all conditions until we were able to really determine what is the maximum duration of a working day, and of course recognizing the principle of equal wage. We also have the principle of union freedom, other analogous measures. So ILO has a mandate to make sure that all human beings, without distinction of race, beliefs, or gender, are entitled to having this spiritual development, freedom conditions, dignity conditions, economic security, equal opportunities. As you know, recently we have recognized that there are works for us to be able to materialize labor rights. And it is even more complicated to determine, let's say, those who are lacking of social protection, to have a fair salary, a safe environment. So that's pretty much the concrete example that we have to think about the fact that we are still just really trying to encompass everything that we're doing. So facing this scenario in the conference,
¿no? Que fue el tema en 2011 que se adoptó
this
el
is something that
convenio
we did in 2019 as
de
well,
las trabajadoras y trabajadores domésticos, en lo cual
on
se
social workers
reconoció
as well. So
la
with that,
condición de trabajo
we
doméstico
also
a
recognize
ventanilla
the
mundial
domestic
y
work
ayer
as well.
este convenio que sus características también
So that
son muy
agreement as well.
específicas
And
y
all of that is
requieren
very important, very
reglas de manera
specific, so
efectiva.
that we can
Y
govern
aquí
everything
México, y aquí nos
more
podemos
effective.
otras experiencias, según las
We have
estimaciones
other experiences.
del ENOE, solo 2 en cada 100 trabajadoras del hogar tienen
According
acceso a
to
la seguridad
the
social. Esta
estimations,
situación
2 in
no
100
es
workers
referida a lo que
are going
ocurre
to
en
help
otros
us as well.
países. Y la OIT
And
calcula
ILO
que
estimates
81% de
that
las personas trabajadoras del
81%
hogar están
of
empleadas en el sector
home
informal,
workers
una
are
cifra
part
que
of the
representa
informal
el doble del porcentaje
sector.
de
This
informalidad
entails
respecto
twice as
a
much
otros
informality
elementos. Sin duda,
versus
uno de
other
los
types of
avances
jobs. There is no
históricos, ¿no?
question,
Y aquí todos aquí ya lo confirmaron, fue el
like we
hecho de
already
haber
confirmed
ratificado el
it,
convenio que mencioné ahorita. Fue
was the
7 años,
fact
¿no?
that
El trabajo
we
doméstico
already
y lo
mentioned that,
que
because we
sigue
know
es,
that
y aquí
all of this is
menciono
becoming more and more
profundidad en esta
visible.
trayectoria de todo este
This is another
proceso.
trajectory. So
Efectivamente, es necesario acelerar su
even though it
implementación
is
para poder
necessary
valorizar uno
for us
de
to
los
be able
trabajos
to
que sostienen la
reassess
vida
the
y
different works that
contribuyen
are
al
sustained
crecimiento
by life,
económico, necesitamos hacer con que toda la
we need
sociedad
to
pueda
make
reconocer
sure
ese valor. Por
that
eso
everyone
nos
can
encontramos en
recognize
este
this
acto
value. So this is the
institucional
main
para
reason
poder
why
presentar
we're
esta
just
publicación que se
really trying
enmarca
to
dentro
improve this
del aniversario
publication that we
de
have.
todas las aquí que nos acompañan. Eso, 80 años no es menor.
We
La
know
OIT
that
tiene
80 years
82 y
is
sabemos
not
cómo
nothing.
fue
It's really
planificado
important,
para
as a matter of
realizar
fact.
todo ese proceso y acompañar los
For that
desafíos,
reason, we're
¿no?
part of
O del
just
mundo
really doing all
laboral
of
que se
this.
enfrenta a lo largo
And
de estos 100 años.
we have
Pero hay
this
otro
work throughout all of
incentivo
these
que
100
hoy
years. There
camina
is no
en nuestra
question that it
dirección
is a
enfrentar,
very
¿no? Y porque
um,
todavía sabemos que las
there's a
trabajadoras del
road
hogar
ahead of us that
no gozan
still
de
is
seguridad
going to
social.
face a lot of
Y la
obstacles, a lot of
historia
hurdles.
comienza, la verdad, con
And
la
story
sentencia de la
begins
Suprema Corte. Aquí
just
Pablo
with a
Márquez
ruling of the
muy
Supreme
claro,
Court.
también ahí reforzado por Marcelina,
And this
que
was
eso
also
genera una discusión
strengthened by
en el hecho de
Marcelina.
que las personas
There was an
empleadoras
organization that
están
also made
obligadas a
sure that
inscribir a las personas trabajadoras del
employers
hogar
are
ante el Instituto Mexicano
well
del Seguro
required
Social.
to
Y eso, la
also
verdad, nos dio
include
mucha alegría poder
their
conocer
social
nuestras
and
vidas de la
domestic
mano de
workers as part of what
mujeres
they're
como
doing. So
Pau,
women
poder colaborar con ese fin
vow for them to be
y
able to
con ese afán
collaborate
de contribuir a la
and also to try to
formalización
contribute to
de
the
este colectivo, ¿no?
to more
Y continuó con las
formalization, more
reformas
formalities. So
legislativas,
we
sabemos que
will
hay muchas
continue
más
with
que
these
van a venir,
laws.
pero la verdad eso nos
To
permitió
be honest, this
precisamente
also allowed
que
us
ahora
to just really
es
do
una
all
ley,
of this.
¿no? Y eso la verdad, la
To be
idea que
honest,
sabemos que podemos realmente
we
fortalecer
know that
ese
we can
mecanismo
also
para hacer
strengthen
la obligatoriedad
all of
de
this just to
trata
make
de
sure
ley sea efectiva.
that all of this
Y
is
bueno,
done
lo que
more
aquí
effectively.
quiero
So
hablar, que
like we mentioned throughout this paths and journeys that have been just part of what Marcelina just mentioned, we need to see who have strived and will continue to strive to have a dignified work, just to continue working with the workers of the region. That could help us really have a dignified work. That is also going to help us do everything the best way possible. So,
ese libro, ustedes van a saber ahorita por paz, también la
well,
responsabilidad
Bas and many
familiar.
others know about this. We have family members, we have spaces, workspaces in general, and all together is going to just somehow make everything more difficult. So, and again, this book is going to help us just close with an experience as well. Well, in Yucatan as well, we have had, let's say, other types of, let's say, industry chambers, restaurant members, and for us to be able to do all of this work so that all of these workers can help us have more effective social security. So, CISS and everyone, thank you so much for helping us out. This was amazing, spectacular work. So, again, this is great work.
Reformas legales, ¿no? Para equiparar sus
This
derechos,
is for us to be able to just really make all rights available to everyone, to make this domestic work more professional. And of course, in all of these chapters, we're going to see how the need to keep on strengthening organizations will keep on being part of what we're doing. And of course, there's room for discussion. So, of course, we still have a long way to go, the lack of standards as well, and everything that just what it entails to have these specific risks.
a las formas
And of
de
course, the way we foresee those risks. By adopting Resolution 190, we have started to recognize that there's existence of violence in domestic work. So this is a phenomenon that is multidimensional. We know that it is very complicated. It's very important as well. So this tends to be somehow hidden. It remains hidden. And we know that
la situación de violencia es muy complicada en ese sector. Se suma, por ejemplo, la
we
ausencia
know that
de una
we also
normatividad.
have the absence of regulations, information.
Esa guía que preparó Sinatrao es muy importante porque va a apoyar para que todas las personas puedan tratar de buscar.
And it is really important so that all persons can really start just really finding defense mechanisms and to make sure that their working space is really important as well for a free of violence space as well,
así como la sociedad civil en su
the civil
conjunto,
society as well.
promover acciones que van a favorecer el trabajo doméstico decente.
So
De
we
esa
know that
forma,
we need to strengthen this domestic work as well to make sure that we have a more inclusive aspect and more inclusive domain. So again, this book is very relevant, even more with this social security environment. This is going to allow us to understand as well what we do in Mexico, how many of you is going to help us just do all of this.
Estaba ahí la futura secretaria Inés, nos acompañó en ese momento.
We have
¿no?
Mrs. Inés as well. So now I just want to really make the most of this recognition of Mrs. Cisnero. This process has been very important. So again, everything that took place during this week is going to be very important because the fact that we can commemorate and celebrate that we have a very special day
nos da un sentido un poco más fuerte porque es necesario reconocer.
Again, I think that it is really necessary to recognize that most of the paid domestic work is conducted by women, of course.
De los empleos desempeñados habitualmente por ellas para poder eliminar estas
We know
brechas de
that,
desigualdad.
of course, we needed to really tear down those barriers and to close the gaps in terms of inequality as well.
A ustedes y fortalecer y capaz de ampliar el nivel de registro de las
And also
personas
this
adultas.
is another
Y estamos aquí
level as well.
para continuar brindándoles esta técnica y seguir,
We were
¿no?
also providing more
esta
techniques.
lucha de cada cual
We
en
wanted to
su
have
trinchera
this
para hacer
provide
algo
everyone from their own
que garantice
sides, from their
una
own arena,
igualdad
from their own
posible
activities, then we can all contribute.
todas las personas. Así que muchísimas gracias
So
y
just
gracias
thank you so
Laura
much for your
por
kind attention. Once
acompañarnos
again,
desde Lima.
thank you
Todos
for joining us from Lima,
hacer el
dear
trabajo
colleagues.
y
Thank you
todos
so much for
aquellos
strengthening the
que nos
work
acompañan en esta
of all of
mañana.
the
Muchas
stakeholders that
gracias.
are now just joining us today.
Muchas gracias, Pedro.
Thank you
Y
so
muchas
much.
gracias a todos los ponentes en
Thank you
esta
so much
mesa.
to all of our
Especialmente a
speakers
las
as well,
compañeras y compañeras
and our
sindicalistas
union
con las que
members.
avanzamos cada día en esta ardua labor que es hacer efectivo el convenio
We really want
189
to
y la
just
convención
really
189.
continue working in
El tiempo
Convention
que vamos,
189
tenía 20
at the
minutos
start, and
y igual yo me habían
so
pedido
I
ustedes en
had 20
especial
minutes. I was asked
sobre el
to
panorama de
give a
la
presentation.
no va a dar tiempo a que la presente. Entonces, para terminar o para hacer
So just for us to be able to
esta declaración de
finish
la OIT,
with this
decir que
presentation by the ILO,
Perdón, pero si la quiere presentar, me está pidiendo
I
el
mean,
público
if
que
you
por
want
favor.
to make the presentation, please do so.
no quería abusar de su paciencia. Vamos a ello.
I
Entonces,
didn't
os voy
want
a
to
contar.
just really make them. I didn't want to use your patience, really.
En la región. Yo no sé, ¿ven ahora mismo mi presentación?
Can you see my presentation
Sí,
there?
sí se ve, nada más hay que ponerla en modo presentación.
Yes.
Ahí está. A ver.
There you go.
Disculpen, esto nos va a quitar más
My
tiempo.
apologies. I know that this is going to take a little bit more time. We still do not see the presentation.
La podemos poner desde acá, permítanme.
Puede ser, a ver, vamos
We
a
could
ver.
share it from here.
Yo creo que en esta podemos.
Ahí va, no, ya la estamos poniendo aquí, ¿no?
Ah, ya la están poniendo.
Now
Modo
we're sharing it over here. Presentation mode, please.
No la veo muy bien, pero
Modo presentación.
Presenters mode.
Abajo a la derecha.
las instrucciones son para mí o para...
No, perdón, para las colegas que aquí están presentando.
Estupendo, muchas gracias.
My apologies.
Ahí va, ahí va. No, esa es otra cosa.
Sí.
I think it's a different thing.
Dios santo. Disculpen las fallas
No, al
técnicas.
contrario.
Our
sí,
apologies.
discúlpenme a mí, vamos
No,
a
on the
ver si
contrary.
consigo.
Y no pueden ponerla en modo presentación, nada más háganla más grande.
Well, if you cannot just share it as, let's say, in presentation mode, you can just make it bigger. Can you see my presentation
Sí,
mode?
pero se ven dos láminas.
Vamos a ver si hacer eso. ¿Ahora?
Okay, how about now?
Ahí está, perfecto.
Ahí está, perdón.
There it is. There you go.
Muchas
My
gracias por
apologies.
Me hacen falta
Thank you so much.
yo creo. No.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Bueno, vamos allá. Entonces voy a ir
All
muy
right.
rápido porque muchas de
So
las cosas
I'll
que
try to
nos han
be
dicho,
very
yo
quick. I
quería,
know that many things
Pedro ya habrá dicho
have
parte
been
de
done
lo
as
que
well.
sé,
Pedro
pero
from the
como
ILO,
mi compañera Larra y yo
my
tenemos un
colleague
poquito
Lara and myself,
de esta publicación,
we also
quiero
had
agradecerles muchísimo
some sort of
al
a
IMSS y a
chapter.
la CISS por darnos siempre su
We just really wanted to
apoyo
thank CISS for
en
helping
este
us
tema
out.
que es tan importante para nosotros. Así
It is
que
very
vamos a
important
hacer
to
un
all of
poco
us. So
una visión de la
we're going to
foto
have
de lo que hay en la
a
región.
some sort of an
Ya se ha
outlook. We're going
dicho
to
que son
see
77
what we have been
millones de
doing.
trabajadoras
We have
domésticas en
talked
el
about the
mundo, de
fact
las
that we already
cuales
have
11.000
77 million of
millones
domestic workers all over the
trabajando
world.
en América Latina.
We have been
Yo
working in
siempre
Latin
lo digo
America.
porque me parece muy
So I've always
importante
mentioned
que
this.
estemos
It is really
una
important
de
that
cada
we
9 mujeres ocupadas
note that
es
1 in
trabajadora
7 BC women
Voy a
are
intercalar trabajo
domestic
doméstico
workers.
por
So now let's
trabajadoras
talk
porque nuestro
about
convenio hace
domestic work.
referencia a trabajadoras
Our
domésticas. En México
convention
yo sé que esta
refers to
palabra
domestic workers. In Mexico,
no
know that
gusta. Hay otros países de la región,
work is
como
this
Argentina,
word is not a
Chile,
word that
que
is
reclaman que se les
appreciated
llame trabajadoras
in
domésticas y se les
Chile
llame
and in
regular
Argentina and other countries. They
siempre
like to use that word. So my apologies if I sometimes use the word domestic worker, okay? So this entails that in Mexico we have 2.5 million, and whenever we have a sector that is so feminized and a public policy where we may see equality in terms of labor rights from this sector, there is a high or a wide range of what we're doing. Also, in terms of what are or the scope, what is the scope of our rights? What we know is that it is a sector that has high informality rates. It has very long rates. It has different, let's say, wages, low wages, a lack of, let's say, social security inclusion in the region. We also have the ratification of Convention 189, knowing that there's 37 ratifications in our region with 18 countries. So what we know is that since it's been over 10 years after this resolution has been ratified, this is also a milestone for social workers. We also know that we have many obstacles that we found, and we also refer to the different rates, informality rates. I know that just by registering them is not enough. We know that these numbers, like 98% for Mexico, there's only two countries in the region that have numbers that are above 50% number of registrations of the formality rates. So it is also important to note that we have different cross-sectionalities, meaning when we talk about the integration of domestic workers, we have some domestic workers, most of them are migrating in what we call value chains. They migrate from rural areas to urban areas. They also migrate to other countries, specifically to the US, to Europe. And it is important to also note that, well, it's important to note that we have Afro descendant women. This is a brief approach that we have to the different regulations. So it is important to also note that this is all the way to 2021 only. So this is a clarification that I want to make, just to make sure that we have all of this coming on. So we have this first regulation that was fostered, which is Convention 189. It is very broad, very progressively, at least implemented in Mexico. We know that they ratified it a little bit later, but again, there are more boosts as well. We have social workers as well. We know that we also have a lot of effects. We know that we have a lot of women who have been locked in at home, in the home of their own employers. So there's many of them suffering from um, different actions, let's say like harassments. They do not have access to social security or to methods. So we need to see how can we move forward in terms of real terms. So we know that whenever we talk about working times as well, a large part of Latin American countries are restricted. Let's say we have some weekly hours. They are working more than they should. They are not having rest hours. And it is very important for those social workers that are more vulnerable. They are internal workers as well. They're highly vulnerable. Specifically, whenever we think about them enforcing their rights, they do not enforce them. They do not have access to daily rest. They do not have access to payment of extra hours. They also have many laws in the region that allow this type of payments as well. So we have an average compensation in the region globally, which is about 56%. And we could say that we have increased this since 2012, which was about 41%, but this is not enough. This is a sector that still has very low compensation averages that are way below others of sectors where people get wages. So we need to start thinking about some minimum wage salaries in some countries. We have minimum wage levels that we're putting into practice. As in the Dominican Republic, we have different percentiles, we have the lowest sectors. This is also an impediment based on the different contributions that we have. And another thing that we know is that all of this needs to be accompanied by just raising awareness amongst the public. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. So now, as for what we're doing as well, we need to think about 18 countries which in their most part have recognized their access to pension, medical assistance. We still have a lot to do when it comes to monetary preferences, let's say working accidents with in unemployment, indemnization, family benefits, as for what has to do with, right, let's say maternity benefits by law. So we are part of this outlook that we have in front of us, let's say according to the law. It has been well provided for. However, we see informality of about 72.3% in the region. As you know, this is a rate used by the ILO, an index that is used to consider what is this indicator in terms what is the effective access to rights and social protection. So we know that this is also having an impact on the exclusion of social security laws. Sometimes we see that they're not enforced because there are not appropriate levels of protection. So what ILO is demanding here is that whenever this type of social security schemes are developed, and we need to consider, for instance, that we could allow all types of insurance, let's say multi-employer, let's say benefits, so that we can also allow access to, let's say, shorter or like working days, maybe by day or by hours. Again, this debate is something that comes hand in hand with workers in platforms, because we know that a lot of people are just somehow sharing some time schedules with domestic workers. So that's why we need to really get into making contributions to adapt everyone to this sector. Another important part is that we talk about inspection mechanisms, where currently they're not really part of the region. Sometimes we know that we cannot really violate the principles of domicile, and ILO thought that even though it is important to really start building capacities related to inspection, there are some other mechanisms that take into account the new technologies that could also support the inspection of the different workers. All of this is very important. It's very important to have social security at work. It is important for us to be able to have access to minimum conditions given the characteristics that work at home has: violence, harassment, and for us to be able to have more labor inspections specifically regarding social and domestic and care workers. Without concluding, I wanted to mention that in the region, we're also developing different laws, policies, comprehensive systems related to care, not only regarding ILO, but also regarding the latest International Labor Conference, where domestic workers became the central part of the care work, labor work. They need to be really at the center of the discussions that have been developed to develop these policies. In ILO, we have worked jointly with them. We have also tried to really do all of this. We have this route as well, and we have been doing all of this. We have been documenting all of this. We know that this is a sector that also requires cross contamination. it also requires capacity, not just to do all of this as part of what we're doing, and also when it comes to, let's say, really equalizing rights. We have talked about this not only in terms of certifications, of their skill set, in terms of how they are appreciated, and also how we are really addressing all of these risks. How can they also be part of this union movement? How can they be part of these collective negotiations? So, from the ILO, I can tell you that this has been one of the boosting principles that make this possible in Mexico. We will keep on just piloting this path in Mexico with these 5 axes at the end of this year. Next year, here is at the center, and also recognition of workers. Workers are their as their main jobs. We also have what we call the Compact of Buenos Aires. We are trying to really provide decent work in the care economy. We need to make investments in that area where we can make it more visible to look after those who are looking after us, who are providing care to us. Thank you so much. And well, that's the end of my presentation.
Muchísimas gracias, Paz, Pedro Américo.
Thank you
Y pues
so
sin duda
much,
sí valió la
Paz,
pena
and
esperar y ver la presentación. Muchísimas gracias, en verdad. A
we
continuación,
honestly appreciate
tendremos
you
el
for your
comentario de
presentation.
nuestra
Now,
amiga y
we
colega
have
Tania
a comment
Espinosa
about our dear
Sánchez.
colleague and friend,
Tania
Tania
nació y
Espinosa
creció en la Ciudad de
Sanchez.
México, estudió
Tania
Derecho
was
en la
born and
Universidad
raised
Iberoamericana en la
in the
Ciudad de México.
Iberoamericana
Obtuvo una
University in
maestría en
Mexico
Estudios
City. She
Jurídicos
holds
Internacionales
a
por
master's
Research
degree
Institute
on
of
legal studies
Diplomacy
by
de
the
Tufts
School of
University en
Law and
Massachusetts,
Diplomacy, Tufts
Estados
University
Unidos,
in
donde
Massachusetts,
desarrolló su
US,
tesis sobre los derechos
where she
laborales de
developed
los
her
trabajadores informales sobre el
dissertation
sistema
on
de
labor
gestión de
rights
residuos en
of
la Ciudad de
informal
México.
workers as part
Desde
of the waste management
2005,
system in Mexico
Tania
City.
ha
Since
trabajado y abierto
2005,
derechos
Tania has
humanos
worked with human rights
internacionales y desde 2013 se ha enfocado
internationally,
en los derechos
and since
laborales en favor de las
2013, she has
personas
been
refugiadas.
focusing on labor laws
Tania comenzó a trabajar en
for
Riego en
people
2015.
responsible for
Fue designada
recycling.
coordinadora de ciudades focales para la Ciudad de México en
So again,
2017,
for
donde
Mexico City,
acompañó a varios movimientos de
and where
trabajadores
we
informales.
had a
En
series of movement,
2023 fue
and in
nombrada coordinadora de América
2003,
Latina para el programa
she
de LEAD.
was appointed the
Como abogada de
coordinator for
derechos
Latin
humanos, Tania
America in the
trabajó para
law
la Oficina
program
de Derechos
as
Humanos de
an
la
advocate for
Secretaría de
human
Gobernación de
rights. She has
México
also worked
de 2008 a
in the Human
2011
Rights
y fue
Office of the
consultora
Ministry
para
of
las
Interior of
Comisiones
Mexico from
Interamericana de Derechos
2008 to
Humanos en
2011.
Washington,
She has
D.C.
been a
en
consultant for the
2013.
Inter-American
Desde
Human Rights
2016
Commission in
también es
Washington,
miembro de
D.C.
la
in
Junta de la
2013
Comisión de
to
Derechos Humanos de la
2016.
Ciudad de México.
She is a
En
member
2021
of
fue
the
elegida miembro
board
de
of
la
the Human
Junta de la
Rights
Comisión
Commission of
Nacional de los
Mexico City. In
Derechos Humanos en
2021, she was
México, la
selected
CIDE.
a board
Muchísimas
member
gracias,
of the
Tania, por
National
estar
Human
aquí
Rights
con
Commission in
nosotros
Mexico.
y
Thank you
con
so
estos
much, Tania,
documentos.
for
Adelante, por favor.
accepting our invitation to comment on this book. Thank you so much. Before we start, I just wanted to greet everyone joining us today, specifically our colleagues who are domestic workers, Sofia, Marilu from Sinatra, and I just wanted to really greet our members here at the table. Thank you so much, Alvaro, for having me. I'm really pleased to be here sharing the table with Marcelina, Inés, Pedro Américo, Paz. To be honest, all of these persons have been with us. We have been also working with them to just really accompany everyone. Their fights with domestic workers. At first, we know that this is a fight that has been headed by Marcelina Bautista. And before we get into that, I also wanted to congratulate CISS, IMSS, also for collaborating and for developing a broad book with content that is not only interesting for whoever wanted to learn more about it, how we have fought to really enforce the rights of domestic workers. It is just some sort of a compilation of events. What is the current situation? What are the challenges? Institutional perspectives, more critical perspectives. It is a very rich, recommendable book. A great recommendation for your read. It's a great contribution for those of us who will keep on building a path here with domestic workers. So again, let's continue. So first, I wanted to talk about the article of Marcelina Bautista, Rodrigo Quintero, social workers, a change of paradigm in Mexico, because it is important to note that today we are here at this point where we are. We're social workers, and everything that we do is due to social workers. They are the ones who have really fostered the agenda. And along the way, they have found partners, organizations, institutions that have contributed to the cause. But this would have not been possible just because the state is willing to do so. No, because we know that we have had lobbying by the different social workers. Like Marcelina already mentioned, we have already talked about the long way we have gone, and that's the article and what we're doing. I just wanted to address not only our history, I just think that the most respectful would be to really tell our own stories. I wanted to talk about our lessons learned, the lessons that we learned from Marcelina. Marcelina has taught us that organization is key. And this is a fact not only for domestic workers, but also with those informal workers. So, again, this is very important, not only in the region, but also worldwide. We know that, of course, these are the types of efforts that would not be the same without really being included like this. So, organization is key. Marcelina has been a creator of institutions. We know that we have CISS, Sinatrao, and they have participated actively. Regional organizations as well. We have international organizations, federal and international associations of domestic workers. So we know that we're working informally in many places all over the world. So now it must be mentioned that I do believe that at a regional level, it is still one of the most well organized occupational groups, I would say. This is going to allow us to talk about the right of association, in this case, a Mexican state, to make sure that we can do all of this only by allowing this right of association. This is a collective right to work that entails just being part of unions, and that's how we are able to have access to other rights that are fundamental rights like decent work. Another lesson learned from Marcelina, like we heard already, is dignity. It is a struggle that we've had, it is a fight that we have been doing, and as part of this organization, we have also worked with other colleagues who are also helping us and with this efforts. It is all part of this, the strength of this movements that we have, the Sinatrao union that keeps on working with affiliation, union work. But I do recall that ever since we have been working as well, so how Marcelina taught us the importance of that name. Like Pedro Américo already mentioned it, our apologies, Pedro Américo as well. So we do have a lot of learnings, and it is not really clear that the way we are being named is particular. Marcelina always said, we are not domestic workers. We are not domestic workers, we're home workers. That's how we want to call it. We do not take any other demeaning name at all. This seems one of the largest achievements. It's not just that it's a matter that is just, consacred in the law. what's important is to see what's the source of all of this. So whenever we think about dignity, and we know that Marcelina, in her article, is talking about partner organization. In my case, in the organization that I work with, WIGO is one of the many partner organizations that this movement has had.
El comportamiento de las organizaciones
And
aliadas
also
estaba guiado
noticing that
por las
the
trabajadoras del
behavior
hogar
of
en ese
partner
momento.
organizations was guided by home or domestic workers. Like Marcelina mentioned, it's not that organization decided what to do. No, we're just accompanying what she mentioned as well. So this is what we decided. That is very important as well. This is very important for all days because workers are the ones who are leading the cause. We have these conditions, and then they decide where they want to go. The third topic is that we managed to do it. We did it. So this is another example for this type of movements in Mexico, this movement of social workers.
El libro que estamos presentando hoy es punta de lanza. Es
So I
un
know
tema
that they're
de
the spearhead. It is something that make us really admire the efforts, specifically because even if they're informal workers, they have not been recognized or as recognized as well. So they're we're recognizing their rights, their dignified conditions as well. And this is really, really important as well. Thank you so much. We know that we really have to thank them for really just doing all of this, for really helping all of the working population, because we're talking about millions of working persons. Thank you so much, Marcelina, for all of this work.
Bueno, aquí cito un párrafo de
Now I'm going to talk
Cisneros
about a paragraph. I'm going to quote it. It is by Angélica Cisneros, the legal recognition of the right to social security of social workers, progress made, and challenges. In the amendment in 2022, materializes the fight that hundreds of domestic workers and their organizations have had for over 2 decades. They have speaked up internationally and domestically for these duties to be part of the Mexican society and to stop being feudal type of society, to become part of the labor rights and access to social security. So this reform crystallizes, like we said, the fight that we have of social workers. We have a series of lucky coincidences from 2018 to we know that we have many articles in the book, and like I already mentioned as well, and like I mentioned in the previous slide in general, this is a fight that has been around for decades. So how can we talk about the fact that in 2018 and 2022 we managed to do all of this? And I'm going to address this in my next slide. We need to have very clear that what really triggered this in 2018 was what we call the indirect amparo, which is like in habeas corpus 2018. This is just a testament of everything that we have, the rights of populations that are very powerful, and we know that we need to really empower them even though they have a lot of vulnerabilities. So this is key so that we do not really question the rights that to which they're entitled. So based on this indirect amparo, one of the main consequences that they had was that the IMSS just launched the pilot program to make sure that domestic workers had access to Social Security in 2019, and then we had an amendment to the federal labor law in 2019, and then we ratified the ILO Commission, and then CONASAMI established a professional salary specifically for domestic work above the general minimum wage. And then in 2022, we had some amendments to the Social Security law on the mandatory aspects or mandatory sides of Social Security. So as a lawyer, it is important to talk about some of the considerations by Perez Dayan in her article Insights Direct Amparo 2019 by the Supreme Court of Justice of Mexico. Why? Because I feel that it is important as a lawyer that law explicitly recognizes what should be done, what the state wants for their state. So this is specifically for some populations. So what Perez Ayan is mentioning is that at first we need to think, okay, where are we starting? And for employers to really dare and to be required to register their social workers in the Social Security Institute, there is no right justification to make a difference between the treatment given by the state to any worker and domestic workers. There was no difference. And what it said is that whenever we had Social Security, that would just harm and damage disproportionately women, because even though in the law we were considering that 9 in 10 persons who are domestic workers are women, this is an article that was harming women and causing their exclusion. An important thing that we wanted to hear from the court is to consider the specific situation of domestic workers. And what the ruling provided for is that their working conditions are not close to decent. Working conditions are far from them, and also the domestic workers are highly vulnerable, that they have low contributive capacity to social security programs. However, the state is required to ensure that social security. Next one, please. So the federal labor law would establish that social security workers would do special work, and that entail them not having proper social security coverage that would allow them to take part of their activities in dignified conditions. Whenever we had this constitutional study, we found that there was no such justification. For that reason, excluding this mandatory regime, what it cost was to just continue with the social marginalization of women that could not be overcome with the voluntary regime of Social Security, which was what the state would offer to Social Security workers, and that's why Section 13, subsection 2, would be deemed, let's say, discriminatory of Social Security rights in terms of, let's say, equality opportunities. In the resolutions of the ruling, it provides that authorities need to take actions to amend both public policy standards and policies, specifically for domestic workers. We need to design a special social security regime for domestic workers to have their specific working conditions taken into consideration, to have a mandatory requirement for employers of domestic workers to register them, to have, let's say, access to social security insurance, such as working insurance, maternity leave, daycare facilities, disabilities, let's say, retirement, many more things. So this was for us to be able to enable social security workers to and domestic workers to also have an affiliation membership. And of course, that it was all financially feasible for IMSS. Norma Gabriela knows this very well, and this has been part of the complexity of just really getting this insurance for them. So, with this, we have the basis of what's going to happen next and what is going to lead us to what we have now, which is mandatory social security for home workers, and it is important to mention this. So, like I mentioned, this happened in 2018. This does not mean that domestic workers started to fight for their rights until 2018. No. Whenever we talk about this, who is part of the government, who's part of the executive branch, who is providing, let's say, justice, was administering justice. So I thought that it was fantastic to see the article by Patricia Mercado protecting who caring for those who care, social security of domestic workers. So it took a century from the Constitution in in 1917, I'm sorry, until 2017 to incorporate decent, equal, working conditions for domestic workers. So Patricia mentions here that international treaties were very important. They were already enforced for Mexico. What does that mean? That there was no need to ratify Convention 189 in this case to recognize what were the rights of domestic workers. The existing framework mentioned that it was important that all workers as well were part of that. We had an amendment to the Mexican legislation that ratifies Convention 199 of the ILO. First, we have to ratify treaties, and then we need to harmonize our laws. Here, it was done the other way around. Why didn't it took place in the past? It has everything to do with political will. And I repeat, it is important to also talk about who is part of the different powers and rights. So Marcelina is talking about the fact that we were about to just really just hand down a ruling that would be favorable for domestic workers, but they feared the organizations as well. Again, they did not have the same rights that other workers had. So we had a lot of uncertainty. It had everything to do with who were those persons who interpreted the law so that they could get to that point. Same thing happened. Same thing happened with that legislative reform. We had Patricia Mercado, which is a historic fighter. She fights for labor rights, union rights, social security rights. They were a great partner to make sure that these reforms would take place and also to recognize Xochitl Galvez. She was another partner. She helped us foster this. And another topic that is also very important, who is the executive branch? So again, we have Convention 189, ILO as well. Many years. This is a convention in 2011. We are told that at least 4 legislators invited the executive branch to start the ratification process, but they did not initiate it. So again, Angelina Cisneros also mentioned in her article that before President López Obrador was in office, no other president had any interests in the human rights agenda, in including domestic workers. So when Peña Nieto was finishing his presidential term, we made a demonstration outside his official house to somehow foster this ratification of Convention 189, and that didn't happen. We had some declaration of a deputy minister of finances, and they said that it was not feasible. But how can you explain that a state and an institution like IMSS with a different president, and how someone said that this was not possible, that Social Security was not possible, and that with another president, then it was possible, and that, as a matter of fact, this took place. They made it happen. So what Patricia is mentioning very clearly is that it was really important to really have political will and for us to be able to really finish these processes. So, and I repeat, this is quite an achievement with Social Security workers who have been at the forefront of this fight. And we also thank the political will of those persons who are decision makers to make this happen. And right now, I know that they took a chance at it. They bet on this and they made it possible. So, coming from an organization that is also working with labor informality, now we're working specifically as well. We have public policies to formalize work as well. And Patricia is mentioning in her article, and I just want to make this connection here. For us to be able to have a true transformation where social workers can also enforce their rights, not only, let's say, public policy. I think that what Marta is mentioning, without really talking about this explicitly, is related to all of that. So here, I would really like to start just really reflecting on this article that Marta mentioned. I am a person who works with different movements of informal workers all over the continent. And having said that, it is very common to see that people have other types of jobs in addition to being domestic workers. And informality means that they're not paying taxes, that's clear. But again, that's one of the myths or common narratives there is around labor informality, that they're not paying taxes and therefore they do not have access to rights. Obviously, that's a false narrative, but common. Now, regarding domestic work, it is important to have a different view. To this, they have this narrative. There are some workers in the public space. They're not being really consistent whenever they're the employees, whenever they need to pay for Social Security for their domestic workers as one of the paths to minimize labor informality. So when Marta is saying that until 2022, only 4% of domestic workers were working in conditions of formality, and this starts by saying that in 2022, less than 2.5% of domestic workers were already registered in the IMSS. And they're saying that 97.39% of women were not working in formality, meaning domestic women were not formally registered. The reasons behind that, and I'm going back to the change of cultural minds, because it is a type of work that is not properly valued, because these are tasks that are mainly related to tasks or chores that women have to do traditionally, and this has as a consequence a low compensation, even though if they know that having domestic workers is going to have a direct economic benefit on their employers. So like we already mentioned many times, the minority of the total domestic workers are men. When Marta is saying that they still have the highest compensation, they have highest levels of affiliation in the case of women, men, and unlike women, we're talking about 97.39% who were working formally. We have 84.16% of male workers who were not formal. Meaning, we know that the percentage of men who were not formal was lower than those of women who were informal. So Marta recognized that there has been an increase in membership over the past year for domestic workers. It has been a very slow process. It has grown, but it has been very, very slow. And precisely what they're mentioning is that the regulations, they're not just improving in terms of everything that we have for, let's say, social workers. And again, in 2023 until last year, and I think that Norma can tell us more numbers about more precise numbers. By 2023, we had 54,623 workers as well. So what this means is 2.3% of the total workers that we have. This allows us to see the challenge that we have. Talking about challenges and income that we have, it is a population with low income, specifically female workers. We know that domestic workers have the lowest range in the service sector. They're saying that 1 in 3 persons who are service workers are charging less than the minimum wage. However, in this situation, we have 67% of the population of domestic workers. And then they end up by saying that there is a double discrimination. Even though Perez Dayan in her article mentions that one of the things that we wanted to do was to finish discrimination, let's say against women and a vulnerable population, it also has to do with income. So what Marta is saying is that this is not the end. So she thinks that this is discrimination because of two reasons. She's saying that there's low discrimination of social workers because they're not really considering, let's say, cleaning activities or chores that are not really important. On the other hand, they're just somehow just reinforcing what Diana was mentioning. This is how she explained that men, when just being part of domestic work, have a higher incorporation to IMSS, but of all of these public policies changes that are very important and key in Mexico, and they're not enough to be able to finish with this uneven grounds that we have these social workers and women who are, well, the largest part. What are the challenges and proposals that we see with the authors that I just mentioned? On the one hand, Marcelina has mentioned that, well, for a long time, there's a possibility of getting an official certification to have access to more possibilities to a competitive challenge. Marcelina has mentioned many times that there are some employers who say, I need a worker who specializes in elderly care. And now Marcelina believes that there's that possibility that we can all have that certification, that they have those skills, so that we can just really demand a higher salary and wage, and not just conforming with what they have. For that reason, it is important to go to those different schedules and payment tables that they have for other types of wages. For that reason, we're talking about the fact that we need to think about dignified laws or minimum wage just by reflecting on it, and for us to be able to conclude to see whether workers could have the development that they should have. If that's not the case, then they're going to have a dignified case. So Marta Cebollada, what she's saying is that we need to have more tools for affiliation, we need to have gender perspective, and also when having communication so that we can see all of this. So we see the example of some international practices. We're talking about Argentina and Spain. And here I'm going to talk about Buenos Aires, for instance, where the government is submitting letters on the affiliation of social security workers and homes that are, let's say, with more income to have or to give tax incentives so that we can somehow encourage their employers to make them part of this membership. Now, Marta Cebollada is also just referring to ILO in 2016 when we were just talking about this labor formalization as well. They talked about the fact that labor formalization is much more efficient when there's a combination of public policy measures, informative campaigns, and we believe that they need to be intensified and redirected, and some, let's say, penalties in case they were to, let's say, in case they fail to make their payments. Social security, let's say, incorporation. We need to have stimuli and encouragement, other incentives in general. Patricia Mercado is mentioning that in Mexico City, we have the highest incorporation rate. It is 8 times higher than that of Puebla and Chiapas. That's concerning because we also have domestic workers that are part of that. So we emphasize more this in other types of other areas of the population. So we see more and more lagging. We have more inspections, more verifications of the government. We have dissemination campaigns as well. Also, we still need to recognize the right to housing or Infonavit, like we mentioned, and when we talk about pensions. This is quite interesting as well, given the number of elders. We have the obligation of having mechanisms that can help us consider what is the actual seniority in a given job so that we can find a solution for their pension and retirement schemes. I think that the book overall gives us a great lesson. That is that human rights are not subject to what the state does. Right to equality, non-discrimination, right to social security, and many more. So they're all available for all persons, no differentiation. And also, I think that it is very important that the care system that the investment is referring to needs to refer to those persons who work, let's say, with also paid domestic workers and also with informal workers, considering that a lot of workers are also telling us a little bit more about what we need to do. Let's say whenever they have to go and sell to a farmer's market or to just some sort of a flea market. So we're saying that these are persons, maybe social workers, and they may not be affiliated to Social Security because their employer decided it like that. So again, this is the only topic that has not been addressed. So the care system is only related to traditional labor, employee relationships. And I know that sometimes domestic workers are left behind or out of it. So we have political will as well. We know that we are right now at a point of Mexican state where we are having the different assemblies just really being aligned, if that's the case. So we need to commemorate the so IMS is going to launch a pilot program that is no longer a pilot program, but in the past. So now that we're thinking about everything, how it's feasible as well, I think that it is very valuable for what's coming and also to recognize the experience of Norma Gabriela. And I know that she's the person who is more knowledgeable in the IMSS in this regard. And also the collaboration with the CISS to talk about good regional practices. Alvaro, I know that he wrote about regional practices. I did not have the time to really get there. But I feel that all of that experience, all of that technical knowledge, that could also help us just really be with everyone so that we can really start working on everything that we do. So in the end, just saying that all these signs that we have on Social Security need to be designed. So we have solid organizations such as CASAS in Netrao. At a regional level, we also have some experiences to contribute to Guinea-Bissau and some others internationally that can help us help the different workers. So that's the end of my comment. Thank you.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias, Tania, por este
Thank you so
recorrido
much, Tania,
tan bueno que hiciste
for
sobre el libro. Y bueno,
this great summary that you had. You have taken much more time than we expected. Maybe we also talked about Social Security, so this has been really important. We really thank you for being here with us. So before we let you go, we want to tell you that unfortunately we do not have the printed book. We will make it happen, and then we can provide some copies to you later on. But again, Mr. Secretary, Norma Gabriela, is there anyone else who would like to share? Maybe. On behalf of the General Director, I just want to thank everyone for taking part in this event, for us to be able to just really give you a document that includes all of this history. It is a document that without a doubt just really helps us understand all of the key actors that help us. Now with Ernesto Herrera, Mabel Freises, who is also helping us with the participation of the different entities in this process. So each and every one of you who have collaborated. So I would like to invite you to please just really just download all of this material. So this was really great, just thinking about all of these options and choices. Sometimes we do not have in Mexico that culture of putting everything in writing. So sometimes people would think that many things happened, but they never did. So this is pretty much what is our duty right now. That's what we're doing right now.
Y presencialmente. Un abrazo.
So thank you so much for being here online and in person.
Gracias. Nos vemos pronto.
Thank you. See you until next time.